Today, we're reading from Parshat Ekev. As I was reading, it just struck me how sometimes Torah is repetitive, right? Things just keep repeating. It's the same type of message over and over again. And so Ekev begins with a familiar condition, I'm going to say. If you obey my laws, says Hashem, I will maintain my covenant with you, and you will experience a life of blessing. That's what he says. Now, it's the same thing. You've heard this before. And how many of you do not want blessing? Okay, I don't see any hands going up, so that I assume everyone wants to be blessed. Who doesn't want the life of blessing? We all want it. Now, the difficult part is the other part, where it says, you obey me. That's the part that doesn't always come easy. In fact, that's the hardest part. In fact, if there is the hardest part to that, it's the actual road. There's a path. There is an endless path of choices that lie between obedience and blessing. And this is where I feel we stand. A lot of times, you and I, myself included, I stand in this space between obedience and blessing. I know I should be obeying Hashem, and I know that if I do, eventually I will come into that blessing. But it's not quite yet. And I have choices to make. I have decisions to consider. So, in my years of lecturing on campus, I have developed what I call a professional habit. During my lectures, a lot of times, as I would speak, I would say to my students in kind of a joking way, you know this will be on a test, right? And kind of in passing, and continue on lecturing. Now, those of my students who were very keen, they would quickly grab their pens or pencils or whatever and start writing down what I just said, because usually I have a PowerPoint or something, or I'll be pointing to particular pages in a textbook, and they're like, okay, this is a cue. I need to write this down. So they'll quickly start jotting it down, the pages down, and concepts and ideas. So every time I come across an important concept and idea, I say, you know, that you might see this on a test at some point. And they start quickly writing down. So I became predictable, very predictable. But you know what? It didn't really matter. Because when it came to putting together a test for my students, I wasn't out to get them. I wasn't out to give them the most outrageous, unexpected, never seen before questions. My goal was not to make them fail. My goal was to draw their attention to the most important key ideas, and if I can somehow highlight them for them, so if I would belabor a point, if I'd repeat it over and over, my students, they would know, okay, this is probably going to be in the test. So yeah, I became predictable, but my goal was not to trip them up. And I think it's like that with Hashem a lot of times. He gets repetitive. He says things over and over. His goal is never really to trip us up. You see, the road between obedience and blessing is really one big, long test. Think about it. In Deuteronomy 8:2, this is what we're reading. This is our parsha. Moses reminds the children of Israel that Hashem made them travel in the wilderness for 40 years. Not just to wander because they needed to wait out some time, but actually to test them. That's what he says. In Hebrew, he says, Lema'an anotcha lenasotcha, which literally could translate as, for the sake of humbling you and testing you, I've made you travel for 40 years in the wilderness. For the sake of humbling you and for the sake of testing you, what Hashem wanted is to see what was in the hearts of the people of Israel. So guess what? Hashem is predictable. There will be a test. And if you pay attention, you will actually know what will be on the test. Every time Hashem will test our faith, He will put us in difficult circumstances. And every time we will be able to lean on His teachings, on His precepts. That's the answer to the tests. They're right there. He's given us the answers. We just need to be able to put them into practice. Now, from time to time, People call me, reach out to me. I receive requests from people. They're going through hard times. They're going through trials. And after I hear the same exact questions, they're kind of frustrated questions. People ask me this again and again. They say, why is this happening to me? Why do I deserve this? This must be happening to me because of some terrible sin in my life or something like that. It's the same questions over and over. And they're not bad questions, because I'll be honest with you, cheshbon nefesh, the looking into our soul, seeing what's going on with our lives, is a good place to start to figure out what's happening. But a lot of times when people start asking me these types of questions, my answer is always the same. I would say, yeah, it's possible. It's possible that that's what's happening in your life. But then I always go to the next option. And I remind them that a lot of times our hardships, they're not punishments, they're tests. That's what they are. Hashem is not punishing you and necessarily making you suffer, but the hard time you're going through may be a time of testing. He wants to see how you will respond in this difficult time. So Moses, for us, he recounts all the different events. He encourages us to look back at our lives, to look back at what God has done for us in the past. And he tells us, recount the great miracles, the victories, the things that have happened, the triumphs. You know what? Each one of those moments was preceded by danger and trials and suffering. But that's exactly why we're supposed to look back. So, if you want to see your enemies defeated, you may be going through something in your life, and you're saying, Hashem, why am I having this to deal with this? He will fight for you. He will defeat your enemies. But if you want to see your enemies defeated, you might first have to be gripped by fear. And then you will see Hashem drown them in the Red Sea. But first, you're going to feel almost the sound that their swords make. You see, if you want to find spring of refreshing water, you might have to wander in the wilderness for a little while and actually experience some sensations of dehydration. And then, all of a sudden, the water will flow from the rock. You see, if you want to have miraculous provision in your life, financially, God's going to provide for you, you may have to go through a time of hunger. You may have to go through a time of nothing. And then, all of a sudden, manna will fall from the sky. And the same with everything else. If you want for your shoes to never wear out, as we read in the Parsha, guess what? You have to be down to your last pair of shoes. And this is where we don't get comfortable. This is where we realize we're struggling, we're suffering, we are being tested. But that's okay. Miracles usually follow on the heels of such tests and trials. So a life of blessing, a life framed by the terms of the covenant. The Lord is fulfilling His promises. That's what He's offering to us. But the covenants require faith and obedience. Our part still needs to be done. And it is this faith and obedience, our part, is usually verified by tests. Sometimes for 40 years. So yes, I'm telling you, be patient. If you're struggling right now, consider whether this is a punishment or just a test. And do not quit on God, no matter what you do. If you're in the hard place right now, do not give up. If you are under pressure, do not give in. If you are being stretched, do not snap. Remember that what follows a trial for those who walk in faith is something really wonderful. If you find yourself standing between obedience and blessing, you're not alone. Keep standing.